where we stand this offseason, what we view as the top 5 players by position. Now, we didn't do every single position. We have top 5 quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, receivers, and then defensive linemen. I have linebackers. Brandon has edge rushers and linebackers. And then defensive backs and linemen, offensive linemen as well.
Some of these guys could be either or.
That's the tricky part. Yeah.
Because I don't have one guy. I have him as D-line, but he also could be a linebacker. So we'll see.
And I have a few ties in 5th place. I just...
Oh, come on, man.
Dude.
No,
Make a choice.
By the way, I had to remake my whole list during the show because I was under the impression that it was going to be all-time top 5 players, not current players.
That'd been a lot tougher.
What is this, the NFL 100? We don't want to get to that negativity.
Fine, we'll save that for another topic.
No,
another
what we
week,
should
'cause
do
we need
is
it.
we need an episode of us ripping the NFL 100. That would get listens. All right, do we want to start at the end or start at the beginning? I don't know.
Let's start with the
thought we were
most
gonna
obvious one.
Okay,
quarterbacks.
let's do the quarterbacks.
But we should count up. We should go from 5 to 1.
Okay. I'm good with that.
I don't know. I think
that
all of
this
our
is,
ones
but
are
I
going to
feel
be the
I feel
same.
like the number one. If you don't have him at number 1, then you're lying to yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
You're lying to yourself if number 1 is not
1 and
Patrick
2
Mahomes.
1 and 2 probably are
Now,
the same.
number 1 is Patrick Mahomes. I think we can all agree
Yeah,
to that.
I got Pat Mahomes at number 1.
Chalk on that.
Now let's say who we have for number 5. My number 5 was I had Breeze written down and then I crossed it out for Watson. And those are the two that I can't really decide between for the 5th best quarterback right now because you have the one of the two guys that's currently beating Father Time, who just helped a receiver set the completed receptions record.
My bottom 3 are old guys.
And then Watson, who is held back by his coach, who is a force to be unleashed that we have not yet seen. So that's my number 5.
You have Deshaun?
We're going for what we predict for 2020 top 5. Okay, Deshaun 5th. Yep. Breeze does not make my list.
I have Tom Brady at number 5.
Okay.
Okay.
I think
I don't have him on here, so.
I think that it was kind of a disappointing season last season for him, but I think he made the most of what he could with the talent level that he had, and I still think it's incredible that at 42 he still can play and still go. And my bottom 5 are pretty much the same, but yeah, Tom Brady at number 5.
No, I was going back and forth as well between I had Tom Brady. I was thinking about Tom Brady, Drew Brees, but I also went with Deshaun Watson at number 5. I think the things that he can do beyond throwing it
That
are what
spin move that was insane.
Yeah, Exhibit A of his
I don't know how
incredible
he got away through that
sack
pass.
illusion in the playoff game.
Right.
I have Deshaun Watson at number 5.
That's what I had to go with here. So we're kind of all in agreement, semi, because you were thinking about Brady. Brady I'll call him an honorable mention.
No,
not on my list.
Brady is more of he gets a little bit of respect because of who he is.
He'll be cerebral. He'll be good, but he's not a game-changing.
No.
He can go out
Plus, if you were looking at what they've done currently, and then looking ahead, I think Brady is in a good position with Tampa Bay as well.
there. So how about Brandon for number 4? Your 4th best quarterback for 2020, you predict?
For number 4, I have Aaron Rodgers,
Oh,
Green Bay.
I got Aaron Rodgers there too.
At 4.
At
Okay.
4. Yep. He's older. We'll see what he's got in his hopefully new receivers that we got showing up. But I got Aaron Rodgers at number 4 for this season.
We're still waiting on some of those hopeful receivers to maybe come around. Besides,
Hopefully in a couple more
not
weeks.
just Devin Funchess, please. Lord. Okay, you guys have Rodgers number 4. Number 4, I have reigning MVP Lamar Jackson.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I have Jackson higher.
And I expect most people to have Jackson higher, but for me going into 2020, this is where there might be a regression year, but also I see other quarterbacks having a better year based on what they had last year and what they're going to do this year. So I have Jackson number 4. At number 3, I have Russell Wilson, the Magic Man, who can do anything, held back by Pete Carroll. Well, I've said that too many times.
He's my favorite player outside of Green Bay.
Electric in all ways. No play is dead as long as he has the ball. And
He's the most annoying person to watch when you're trying to cheer against him.
exactly.
Against him.
Yeah, and so that's why he is number
Yeah,
3.
he's incredible.
He is that special, and he showed that by he stayed in the MVP race for most of the season against the story. And it's hard to stick with the story of the year, and he was able to do that for 14
For
weeks.
at least 13 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at yours because I'm missing some stuff. For me, number 3, pretty much what you said for your number 5 is what I would say for number 3. I have Drew Brees at number 3 because it's a similar thing to Tom Brady, where at his age, it's still impressive that he can compete at this level. And, luckily he's got a guy like Michael Thomas to throw the football to. But like you said, he made Michael Thomas they worked together, and he helped make him a star. And with Drew Brees is in at quarterback, and I understand Teddy went undefeated when he filled in, but when Drew Brees is in at quarterback for the Saints, it's hard to pick against them, and he's still doing it year in and year out. So Drew Brees is my number 3.
That's a solid 3.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I have Lamar at number 3. I think his running ability is so superhuman that it makes him hard to beat, and that's what makes him an incredible quarterback.
Watson, Wilson, this is a type. This is a class of guys that are not only able to beat you through the air, and it puts them in a higher spot.
Yeah, it makes him even harder to game plan against. That's
makes
why
him-
he won MVP.
Makes them top 5 quarterbacks.
Yeah, definitely. These are the difference makers. All these guys can throw. Wentz can throw. Matt Ryan can throw.
Stafford can throw.
The other stuff you can do is what makes you the best.
Right. How about
X Factor.
How about Jake? We'll flip it to you for your number 2.
My number 2 is Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, that's why I gave it to you here.
Yeah. Ever since he was at Louisville, just his ability to make plays with the football, similar to what you said about Russell Wilson. No plays ever really dead with Lamar Jackson. I do think it, might be a little bit high, but as someone who's the reigning MVP, it's hard for me not to put him up there. And Patrick Mahomes obviously is the number 1 for everybody because he's the new face of the league.
He's probably the best quarterback I've ever seen.
Yeah,
from a talent standpoint.
It's unreal. And every great thing that Lamar Jackson can do, I think Patrick Mahomes can do just a little bit better. So,
except maybe in a 40-yard dash.
But here's the other thing
Yep.
too, Lamar.
Pure speed, yes.
Pure speed, Lamar
would. Yeah,
we
But
thought
Mahomes
about
did have
him
the
racing
30-yard
Vic.
touchdown run in the playoffs
that made no sense.
to show his crazy athleticism.
That run didn't make it because he's so tall.
Yeah.
that it doesn't look like he's running. It
Right.
looks like he's just on a nice leisurely jog into the end zone. I will say I thought about docking Lamar because he really didn't show up against the Titans. He did not play well in that game. But then again, he did so much throughout the rest of the season. It's kind of hard for me not to put him up there.
Yeah, I had a little bit of that thinking. My top 3 are Super Bowl winners, and Lamar's 4th. And that's not a knock against Lamar. I want to see something from him.
Whatever.
Well, that's quarterbacks.
Who's your number 2?
Oh, my number 2 is
I have
believe
a
I
feeling
almost
of who
skipped
your
this.
number 2 is, but
Aaron
yeah,
Rodgers?
it's Aaron.
Yeah.
For real?
Oh, absolutely. And here's why. It's because I believe that he is going to have a better statistical year than last year because he had almost worst of his career. It's like 3.8 seconds from snap to pass, and the cupboard was bare. And this year, knock on wood, going to have some better options than last year.
Are you using my Tom Brady argument against me?
It is a little bit of the Brady argument, but we see Rodgers is the more athletically gifted guy, and that's why I think that he can do more when the cupboard's bare. Yeah. And I think he's going to have a great year this year because the Packers went 13-3 in a rebuilding year. All right, let's pull the
they
team
didn't
together.
have a lot of stars, and they went 13-3. So that still says a lot.
You had a lot of guys step up, but we don't need it to be Jake Kumro. We need it to be CeeDee Lamb.
yeah, I agree.
So
Yeah.
Rodgers number 2.
Yeah, and I got Russell Wilson for the same thing, for the reasons that I stated earlier when Paul put him in there. Russell Wilson, like I said, he's my favorite quarterback to watch. He's incredible. If it wasn't for Pat Mahomes, he would by far be my number 1 quarterback.
Right.
Russell Wilson's incredible.
He is. And it's hard to say as a Packer fan because he's burned us, too many times. Too many times. Well, that's quarterbacks. To running backs, let's go down the line here. We could start at 5 here. See, I had another battle.
I think it's
couldn't
more
do
fun
it.
to count up than to count down.
I couldn't quite do it. I had Gordon and Henry in this slot that I just
Melvin
couldn't-
Gordon?
Yep,
Wow.
yep. Melvin Gordon.
Melvin Gordon. I don't know about that.
So you pick Melvin as your number 5?
No, I got to
Or
go with
Derrick
Henry.
Okay.
I mean, he had the year and he's franchised. I expect a lot from him.
man,
I have him 5th. Yeah, but barely made the list because
completely opposite of my list.
here's why he's 5th. He had the best year of a running back this year, but he is kind of a one-use kind of guy.
Yep.
He is not the 4 people I have above him can beat you in multiple ways. And that is why I have him as 5th and more versatile people above him.
I'll piggyback off you because I have him I have Derrick Henry at number 5 as well for the exact same reasons. He's a hell of a runner, but he's not very good in the pass game.
Not many guys turn you into their blocker.
Yeah, but in this NFL, you got to be able to do both.
Right.
And these other runners can run the ball really well too.
It's kind of, it's
And I
the
hope Derrick Henry can become a receiver because him against corners, come on.
Oh yeah, and that's what's going to
against linebackers.
That's what's going to get him his next contract is if he can show this year that he can do that.
Definitely.
How about you, Jake, for number 5?
My number 5 is Todd Gurley because I think this will be a good kind of bounce back year for him. I think he was extremely underutilized last season with the Rams. And when he was actually healthy and they actually gave him the football, he showed you why he's one of the better backs in the league and why there had to be some sort of personal issues with Sean McVay and Todd Gurley because I don't
started in the Super Bowl.
the postseason, the year before. So I think he's in a good spot with Atlanta in a sense that they're going to probably give him the ball more to take the pressure off Matt Ryan. So I think he is primed to have a good season, and I think that's why he's my number 5. Is I'm looking ahead for Todd Gurley. I think it's going to be better than it was.
2 years removed from being the best running back in the league.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
and he had an injury. And
definitely has the talent.
they gave up, and the way that they gave him away, like that was such. It was it's business, but the fact that they waited until the last possible day to be like, oh yeah, we'll release him, and then they take all of that money that they could have paid him with. But they're
Right.
like, no, we'll just take all this.
Yeah, it's a business.
So it is a business. It is what it is. But I think he was extremely underutilized with the Rams the last year or so, and I think the Falcons will use him effectively.
I hear what you're saying, and I hope he has a good year. As somebody that's dynasty owned him in fantasy for a few years now, he kind of let me down for what I'd expected last year. But these 4 guys, I had 5 guys, with Henry that I just saw as better 2019 and a better projection of this upcoming year.
Yeah,
and
I honestly didn't think about Gurley when I was thinking top 5 running backs.
I thought about him. But I thought about where he's at and how his knee looks, and I just couldn't say he's the 5th.
Do you not remember what Adrian Peterson did after an injury?
Oh yeah, I remember that he was 8 yards short of a record, or 9.
9, I think.
9.
Who cares? 2,000 yards.
Yeah, he had 2,000 yards.
MVP.
Which none of the guys on this list has had 2,000 rushing yards.
But that's why it's so special because you don't see that all the time. So I understand where
That's
you're
why
coming from.
he's
Less
so
than a year
special.
removed
Yeah,
from an ACL tear.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
How about for your number 4, Jake?
CMC, Christian McCaffrey, is my number 4. I thought about putting him, and kind of similar to what you did, that my middle numbers here are all because they're a little bit more versatile and they could do more. I thought about putting CMC a little bit higher because he is that whole offense. I don't know. I'm worried about him going into 2020. I think he had a really solid year again. Christian McCaffrey's one of the better backs in the league. But going into 2020, I don't think he's going to have as big of a workload as he usually has because you do have Teddy Bridgewater now. But we'll see. I think Christian McCaffrey's still a solid workhorse, and I'd put him at number 4.
How about for you, Brandon? Number 4.
I have Alvin Kamara from New Orleans at number 4.
Solid choice.
Great runner. Mm-hmm. Great pass catcher.
Better pass catcher,
Yeah,
arguably.
better. I would agree. I mean, he's a stud.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Great
not much
player.
else to say about him.
For my number 4, I have Zeke Elliott.
You and I have different opinions on running backs.
Zeke, part of it is one of the best offensive lines in recent memory, but another part of it is, here's why I have him at 4 instead of where I would put him in the last few years is higher, top 3 running back, but I didn't see the vigor from him last year, and that started with, his contract negotiations to start the season. And then he just wasn't quite as dynamic. And, well, you got to watch out because he could get 140 this game if he feels like it. I just didn't feel that last year as much. So I still think he's a top 5 running back, and he can break you at any point. But I have him 4th, and there were 2 people that I decided to put ahead of him because of those thoughts on him last season. Those 2 have already been mentioned. We'll go to my 3rd, Alvin Kamara. Incredibly versatile for everything Brandon just said. Great pass catcher, but stats weren't there as much. And so that's why I have him 3rd instead of higher, as what we've seen from him before. Which comes from Michael Thomas being targeted more, maybe. How about for your number 3, Jake?
I have the same. I have Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
I may have stole a couple from your list because I was short a couple, and I was like, "Oh, those are good answers." Different spots, but yeah, I would agree with everything you said about Alvin Kamara. I don't personally like him as a Buccaneers fan because he's too good, but no, I'm kidding. I don't care. Yeah, it is his ability to catch the football out of the backfield, and that's why I put him above Christian McCaffrey. I think he's a better receiver than Christian McCaffrey, and slightly. It's like what I was saying with Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. I just think he just does something a little bit better than Christian McCaffrey.
And Brandon?
I have McCaffrey at number 3 for the reason that I put Derrick Henry at number 5. I think he's the best. You were just talking about you think Kamara is. I think McCaffrey is the best receiver out of the backfield in the league.
I think they can go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, they're the same. So I have him as number 3 for the fact that I think he's one of the best receivers in the league, not just running backs. I mean, he was first team All-Pro in 2 positions this year. So
yeah, he had an incredible season.
Yep.
That's
why he's my number 3.
And how about for your 2?
For number 2, I got Zeke.
Okay.
I got Zeke.
He was initially my number 2, and then I put Kamara and McCaffrey ahead of him, and I moved him to 4th.
Yeah, and I can't argue. I think Zeke did have a down year, and I think that there's something to do with head coaching, and I wonder if McCarthy if he'll help that.
Has he ever
he'll
utilized
change
a
it
running
around.
back?
Yeah, but Green Bay's never had a guy like Zeke either.
That's a great point.
And Dak is not
Or a
Aaron
running
Rodgers.
line.
And Dak is not Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
So we'll see.
Who knows what's going on with Dak? With that money, with his deal, we don't know any of that.
I think he deserves it. Pay the man. He's the face of the Cowboys,
I'm not
and
gonna
he's
pay
been
him that
good.
much money. Good, not great. Got to be great to get that kind of money.
Who's your 2, Jake?
Zeke.
Zeke.
Yeah.
Seems like we all had the same thoughts here for 2, 3, and 4, just about.
Yeah, your number 1 is going to be different than mine for sure. But Zeke's similar situation. He did have a little bit of regression, but he's just one of those guys that I think every year is going to be a breakout year. And I think I was wondering about that too with McCarthy, with how he didn't utilize the running game in Green Bay, and how that's going to be different for Dallas. I think it is going to be a lot different because Zeke is one of the best security blankets you could have in the NFL. And
yeah.
Yes.
it was so crucial that he came in the same time that Dak did, because Dak didn't have to be as good as he was because he had Zeke. And I think Zeke's going to bounce back this year.
My number 2 is McCaffrey, and so in some way our 2, 3, and 4s were all the same.
Yep.
Just
Pretty
different order,
All
yeah.
different
pretty
orders.
interchangeable, but I saw a lot from him this year workload wise, and he just in every facet of the game he excelled. And I expect that to continue this next season as the defense doesn't have to maybe focus on him as much, depending on what Carolina's doing, at quarterback and with their scheme. I think he's going to have another great year. And then I think that Jake, you want to go first for your number 1 here?
My number 1 is the complete opposite of what you had. Number 1, Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. And while there are compelling arguments for the other 3 people that we just talked about, and I think they're very fair, compelling arguments, but Derrick Henry literally carried his team to an AFC championship. And that should I think that should put him at number 1 for that specific reason. And then on top of that, I think you have almost the same team as you had last year, and I don't see why he wouldn't have a good season again. And I understand he's a little bit one note, and he does have to be a little bit in this league nowadays. You have to catch the football out of the backfield. But I just think that his performance last year, and I think he's set to have another great year this year. So I think he's the best right now.
Brandon, for your number one,
My number one is Saquon Barkley in New York.
ever heard of him?
He's kind of good.
Yeah. My number one as well.
Yeah.
And I think we had similar thoughts on this, and I wanted to wait until we got through this to really. I wasn't gonna hit him with it, but our list would be the same. Whereas Brandon and I have Saquon, and you, Jake, have Todd Gurley. And so when you look at that one back, they had very different 2019s.
Yeah.
And I get that, you built your list differently with Derrick Henry at the top, who had the best individual season, which makes sense. But man, you should put Saquon at 5. That's okay.
The stuff Saquon can do is ridiculous.
The thing,
I think it's mostly because it's the Giants. I think that's what made me not think about.
That's okay.
Saquon
No,
should
it
be
is
in
the
front of my
Giants.
mind,
It is
but
the
I
Giants.
think the Giants, and I think just Gurley moving to Atlanta, I think made. If Gurley stayed with LA, I'd probably put Saquon at number 5.
well, that's our running backs. Let's skip ahead here and do those guys that are helping out the quarterbacks and running backs. Let's do our 5 offensive linemen. We're not doing that last. You guys don't want to hear that. So we're going to do our offensive linemen here, okay? And all I did were who I think are the top 5.
Just list your 5 in the
Right. And
because that's how mine is built as well. Mine's not a ranking really.
okay, but you made a line.
I made an entire. If I could handpick my 5 guys in the league to be my offensive lineman, these are the guys that I would have.
I have 3 tackles and 2 guards. I didn't build a line.
See, I would have had a tackle as well instead of a center. My original ranking had 3 tackles and 2 guards as well, but I changed it to make it more of a traditional what I would want if I was going at it this year.
Right. Well, I can start this with my number 5. I have young phenom Quentin Nelson from the Indianapolis Colts, who just watch videos of him hitting people. I mean, in the league, and he just knocks people on their butt. Besides that, apparently, there's this hilarious story. He got upset at Eric Ebron for helping up a defender that he had just pancaked. And he was like, hey, man, don't help up my guy. Like, it was like, I just emasculated. That's my guy, okay? You help up the guy you hit, all right? If you're cool with that. Don't help him. and that's the kind of attitude I want out of,
Right.
one of the best young run blocking guards in the league.
You want somebody nasty, man.
He's got a good nasty streak. I like it. How about you, Jake? Did you make a line or do you have 5?
I mean, I have 5. Quentin Nelson was my number 1, so I was with you there. I had Jason Peters from the Eagles because to be in the league as long as he has and still be as good as he is impressive.
He made the all-decade team.
Yeah, he did.
And he's still going, which is hard to say for an offensive lineman.
Right.
Jason Kelsey, just because he's a Kelsey. No, I'm kidding. But he had one of the greatest Super Bowl speeches I've ever heard. So he should be in there for that alone.
Hold on. Are you going through your whole 5 here?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really.
Yeah. I don't have rankings either, really.
Okay.
I'm
All
just-
right. Hit me with the rest of
my
yours.
last 2, Lane Johnson for the Cowboys. It's really hard to just pick one Dallas Cowboy lineman, but I think he's probably their best overall. And then before all this, the controversy that went on with the Redskins, I think Trent Williams was one of the top offensive linemen in the league.
Is the offensive lineman portion of this segment really going to be the part that I argue with you the most?
Maybe.
I'm sorry. We have, besides Quentin Nelson, we have 0 of the same people on here.
I have one other person.
Jason Peters.
Jason Peters was a maybe for me until I did a little research and I had to throw it to Ryan Ramczyk, who's a guy that's been in it for almost a decade now.
Ramczyk is a good one.
Another like Quentin Nelson, an older Quentin Nelson, where it's a bully of a guard. And those are my 2 guards. The rest of mine are tackles. But my other guys, Taylor Lewan, for the same reason as Quentin Nelson, he's young, but helped out Henry a lot this year. and I think he's got a bright future. Ahead of him, I had Ramczyk, and then Tyrone Smith, who was the Cowboy I chose, their left tackle superstar, and David Bakhtiari. I mean, cornerstone. Where would the Pack be without him?
You know what? Good question.
Brandon, I'd love to hear your offensive
Yeah,
line.
my offensive line, starting at left tackle, I have Bakhtiari. I think he's the best pass blocking tackle in the league, pass blocker in the league,
Yeah.
any position.
Which,
I
if
have-
you're the best, you
yeah.
never hear of him, right?
Exactly.
That's it.
I have Quentin Nelson as well. We've mentioned him now 3 times. I have Jason Kelsey at center with Zach Martin from Dallas,
good one.
who I think is the best guard in the league. And then I put Mitchell Schwartz from Kansas City at right tackle for my 5 best offensive linemen, or the best 5 at their position.
So you picked the best right
Basically,
tackle.
the number 1 tackle. Yeah, right tackle.
Okay, see, we all found our lists different ways, but, they all got a lot of good people
I
on
have
them.
2 Eagles on here, and I did not expect that.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Well, they've had a consistently dependable running game, whether they're 9-7 or 13-3 or whatever their record was. But now back to the more glamorous positions. Let's talk about some divas, our wide receivers.
All right.
My 5th, man, I just couldn't leave him off the list, even though he had a crappy year. I had to put him on there because he's a top 5 receiver, and that's Odell Beckham by the skin of his teeth is my number 5. Beat out Devontae Adams and Mike Evans for that 5 spot.
Yeah, OBJ is not on my list. And people that have listened to this podcast know my feelings on OBJ.
And mine on the Browns.
Yeah, exactly. Number 5, I'm going to go with Mike Evans. I think that he has been consistently the number 1 guy for Tampa Bay. He's been their best receiver, and I know compared to other, receiving cores, that's maybe not the brightest compliment, but even with Chris Godwin really coming into his own last season, Mike Evans was still consistently a good receiver, making big-time plays, and he's been doing that ever since he showed up for the Buccaneers. And I'm not trying to just be biased. I'm just saying.
He almost made my list. That's a good pick. And Brandon, for your 5?
For number 5, I actually switched this morning. I had Tyreek Hill at number 5.
He woke up and had a revelation.
And I remembered this guy named
have
Odell
Tyreek.
Beckham Jr. And I'm like, he's got to be on the list.
Let me show you a YouTube clip from 2014.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking after
And
last
the reason,
year,
and here's why I have
think he's
OBJ.
gonna blow up this
Here's
year?
why I have OBJ over Tyreek. Tyreek Hill only works when you have Pat Mahomes at quarterback. He's too fast. OBJ can work with anybody.
He's situational.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill is he's a great receiver. Great receiver.
you and I have different opinions on Tyreek Hill.
I don't think Tyreek Hill works with a lot of quarterbacks.
I have very strong personal feelings
well,
about
this
Tyreek
is
Hill as a
strictly
person.
about between the sidelines. All right.
This is a lot of Tyreek talk this episode.
so that's why I went with OBJ at number 5.
OBJ 5.
Yep.
Those are our 5s. How about for your 4th? Then,
For number
Brandon?
4, I went with Devontae Adams. I think he is most of my receivers are, besides I had Tyreek Hill and I switched it, are route running specialists. I think that's the most important aspect of a player.
You went with the technical
receiver.
side.
Yeah, so I have Devontae Adams at number 4.
So you did a little more technical, whereas I took where you were saying raw talent aspect of it to where I Adams barely didn't make my list, which I mentioned, and I have Hill at 4 and OBJ at 5. Whereas, you're totally right. He's situational, and maybe not every quarterback could utilize him as well as Mahomes does. But I think that for what he brings to the speed aspect,
I can't argue against Tyreek Hill. I can't.
no one can do what he can do.
No,
I
completely agree.
but he's still as low as 4th because there are 3 dudes that are.
No, there's some dudes in the NFL.
There are
at
3
wide
dudes
receiver.
that need to be the top 3 here.
You're gonna be surprised at my number 4.
Oh, gee.
Because, you would think I'm a Falcons fan the way I'm hyping up their offense in 2020. I think Julio Jones is my number 4.
Jake.
He did not have the best year last year. But I think Julio, and the reason I put Julio at 4 is because I think Julio is going to get back to where he was in 2020. Because I think having Todd Gurley is going to take a lot, add to the offense, give some play action passes, and he's going to make those plays again. I think Julio is still, in my opinion, one of the better receivers in the league. Devontae Adams was also going to be in my list, but I just dropped him out because I just feel like Julio is primed to get back to where he was. I have him at number 4. And my top 3 is going to be a little bit interesting because I don't necessarily agree with what you guys say about Tyreek Hill, but that's beside the point. He's not my number 1. I'm not giving that away.
How about for 3?
Number 3, I got Michael Thomas. If DeAndre Hopkins didn't exist in this league, I probably would put Michael Thomas number 1. But, I mean, what else can I mean, he's one of the best in the league. Did he have a... I know DeAndre Hopkins didn't have a drop in 2018, I think. But Michael Thomas, I don't think he... I've never thought that he could drop a football. He's incredible. So he's my number 3. I really like Michael Thomas.
So we'll do these as top 3 and why we put them this way. Jake, you had Hopkins 1.
And Tyreek Hill number 2. Mm-hmm. The reason Tyreek Hill is number 2...
And then Thomas 3.
Yeah, so Thomas at 3 because he's incredible. I went back and forth with him and Tyreek. I flip-flopped so much with them at 2 and 3. I just didn't know. I think the difference for me is Tyreek Hill, when he was needed, and when the Chiefs need to spark, they had Mahomes, sure. But I think especially when I saw it in Super Bowl 54, when the Chiefs were in a bad spot and they needed a big play from a superstar, he was there to make that play. He was like what Julian Edelman was doing in Super Bowl 53. I saw him do that in Super Bowl 54. And I think that's what made me edge him into the top 2 because it takes a legitimate talent. Speaking of which, Jordan Edelman, I'm surprised he's not on my list. But if we did a top 10, he'd probably
Get outta
be
here.
on there. But
Maybe
Really?
as like 10th.
really? I'd put OBJ in my top 10, but not my top 5.
All right. Brandon, how about for your 3? And,
Number 3,
and why?
I put DeAndre Hopkins, and here's why.
How is he not number 1?
DeAndre Hopkins is a great receiver, but he didn't break any NFL records this year or last year, and he's not Julio Jones.
Yeah.
That is honest. That's the difference. There's nothing against DeAndre Hopkins. If I could put 3 guys at number 1, I would, because all 3 of these guys,
He's so interchangeable.
all 3 of these guys are studs.
1A, 1B,
Yeah,
man.
I mean, I would love to have any of them on my team,
That was
but
my
I
hardest.
I put Hopkins at number 3, and that's why.
And so you're 2 and 1.
So number 2, I put Mike Thomas because he just broke the NFL record. You get some credit for that, and I got Julio Jones at number 1 because he's Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins put together.
Yeah.
Even with the last bad season last season.
What was his bad season? 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. It's a bad season.
It was better than 2 seasons ago where he didn't have a touchdown until like week 10 or whatever it was.
You need to ostracize him as much as you ostracize me
Here's
for
the
putting
deal.
Julio in my top 5.
Here is
I
why.
like it, though. I like it.
No, I'm locking Brandon in here. I went 3-2-1 chalk with Brandon because I put Nuke 3 because exactly as you said, I know what he can do, but he didn't do what Michael Thomas did.
Exactly.
And then
Those 2 guys are
Julio
the same to
Jones.
me.
And then I put Michael Thomas 2 because he is an incredible physical specimen, and he also set the receptions record.
Yeah.
But then that man, Julio, is number 1 the same way that Randy Moss would be
Calvin
one.
Johnson.
Calvin Johnson.
Yeah.
He's
He's there. He's that kind of physical specimen.
until we see a serious physical regression. I don't see how he stays number 1. And that was my biggest surprise, Jake, was when you had Julio at 4 because I know that you're valuing the electricity of Tyreek Hill, where he's not a go up and beat you in the air guy.
Yeah.
Like these other 3 outmuscle you in the air, but Tyreek does something they can't do, which is the 30-yard sideline to sideline.
But Julio's pretty damn close.
Julio had that, what was it, the gazelle-like rush to the corner of the end zone. Was it the Super Bowl? It was probably
Are
the
you sure
2018 Super
you
Bowl.
weren't talking about the Eagles game where
Whenever it was, that was the play where I knew, before he had the toe touch, Super Bowl
man.
catch, I knew he was...
Tyreek runs a
Different beat.
4-2.
You
talk
Julio
about a
runs
guy,
a 4-3.
You talk about a guy that's wasted on Dan Quinn. It's Julio Jones.
Yeah,
He deserves so much better.
yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins is my number 1 because like I said, I mean, this was the hardest one because they're all so interchangeable. And
As long as you didn't have Hill number one. You had
No.
one of the three correct
yeah,
guys as number one.
I don't think. Yeah,
Again, I didn't have Tyreek on my list. Can't argue against him being on the list though. Like I said, I had him on it for a week.
It's very similar.
be interesting
Again,
to see the tight ends here because
our tight ends,
there's
yeah.
going to be a lot of disparity. But
Yeah, this one was a little tough, especially at the bottom of my top 5.
yeah, that was the hard part.
I don't know the order, but we're all going to have the same top
One and,
two.
It's going to be the quarterbacks. 1 and 2 are going to be the same. Yep, are going to be similar.
But at 5, I had Hunter Henry at 5.
Interesting.
You know, not the most durable, but from what we want out of tight ends in the evolving NFL, they are leaner, sleeker, faster, more receiver types. And I see that out of Henry. But I want to see more out of Henry, which is why he was 5th when I think he has more talent than my number 4 guy. Brandon, who do you have for 5?
I put Mark Andrews out of Baltimore at number 5. Probably the best receiver in Baltimore.
He had a great year.
Great year. I put him at number 5 just because I think he's the guy who's going to get the ball the most in Baltimore, and they're going to be a high-powered offense just like they were this year.
Until they really develop a go-to receiver, I definitely agree with you. You know, they have speedsters, but they don't have a number one guy. Like you see a lot of the contenders have number one guys, even, you know, Evans, Keenan Allen,
You
Devontae
need
Adams.
somebody, whether it's
OBJ.
George Kittle in San Francisco. You know, San Francisco didn't have a number one, but you have George Kittle. You need
Yeah.
somebody who can go get the ball.
Right.
That's the most important thing.
It's a good point. Jake, for your 5,
I'm going to go with Eric Ebron as my number 5. I think.
high stock. High stock.
Well, I think he is.
He's got a bag.
Yeah, I did get a lot. And you know what? It's funny is it was just the classic NFL story of he underachieved in Detroit, and then when he got to a better team, he played a lot better. And he is one of the better tight ends in the red zone.
Yep.
He's a
Great red zone threat.
he's an old school tight end where you put him against the tackle and
Yeah.
you put him in the end zone. He's going to score a lot of points. And I think he's one of the better players on the Colts. So I got him at number 5.
He is one of the guys, you know, I have nobody on my list that I would put in this category, but the last generation of tight ends, which were
Gonzalez.
the Gonzalez, the Jimmy Graham guys, the Antonio Gates guys, where it's basically a power forward. It's a guy that's going to post you up and
basketball player.
Yeah, exactly, and beat you in the air.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that he's one of those guys. You do see that from Ebron, where he's gonna run 8 yards, spit on a dime, and he can go up in the air and come down with it if he's
high-point that
hit.
ball.
Yeah, exactly. But he didn't make my list.
Ooh.
At number 4, I have Austin Hooper.
Okay.
Good, you know, he got a bag too.
He did.
And I think that he's going to have a good year as the security blanket for a scrambling Baker Mayfield. So that's why he's this high on my list. How about for you, Brandon? You're 4?
Number 4, I put him here. I put Hunter Henry at number 4.
Okay.
And that's based on potential. I think this guy is pretty close to Rob Gronkowski.
He's got to
If
put
he-
a full season together.
If he could stay healthy, this guy is more athletic than anybody else on this list. This guy, I mean, and he's 6'7".
Yeah.
The guy is unguardable.
And he's a receiver,
Yeah.
you know?
So, but he's number 4 because he's only playing 8 games a year,
Exactly.
and you got to play more.
That's why I said I think he's better than Hooper.
Yeah.
But, you know, based on what I've seen you do and what I think you can do, I have Hooper above him right
But
now.
he's definitely one of the most impressive tight ends in the league in terms of what he can do when he's out there.
I'd agree.
Very productive.
Jake, for your 4?
It's funny that you say that because Hunter is not on my list. And we were talking about Ebron wasn't on your list. Number 4, I got to go with Kyle Rudolph because Kyle Rudolph has been very consistent for the Vikings.
I really can't argue with that.
He's just been dependable, and when you need him the most, I mean, he got the game-winning touchdown.
yep, that's right.
Regardless if he pushed off or not, he still scored, and that's
Dude, he's so pushed. You can't. He extended his elbow like Carmelo Anthony, bro.
But that's why he's my number 4. I mean, these 5 guys on my list have been there for a few years because I think these are in my mind, the best guys in the league, and I don't know how it maybe change the order a little bit, but I feel like it's just consistently been that way. But yeah, Kyle Rudolph is my number 4.
How about for your 3 then?
Zach Ertz is my number 3.
Well, mine as well.
Same. I have Zach Ertz at number 3.
Chalk. Is that besides Mahomes?
I think that's the first team.
That's the first one we've had since Mahomes where we all have them in the same spot.
Well, now, yeah, 1 and 2 is going to be interesting.
Yeah, because we have the same guys, but we don't know if they're in the same order. Let's go to. I want to hear Brandon for your 1 and 2. I bet I know it, Hawkeye, but let's hear it.
No, my number 2 is Kittle.
Wow,
That's me.
shocking.
That's me, too.
I put him 1.
Number 2 is Kittle.
you could go back and forth.
Yeah, no, you really can.
It's you guys against me, so you first.
But Travis Kelce. I mean, we saw it in the Super Bowl. We saw it in the AFC Championship game. You see it all year long. This guy, I mean, he made the All-Decade team, and he only played for 6 years. The guy is incredible. The guy can score. He's always open. He's a matchup nightmare. I said Hunter Henry is close to Gronk. Kelce might be Gronk.
Kelsey's
think-
flashy, man.
I think Kittle's might be Gronk, though. I don't know.
See,
I don't know,
George
man.
Kittle is a great blocker,
right.
Fast.
and
got
he's
a lot
very
of speed.
fast. But I love Travis Kelce.
I can't argue with Kelsey, but what I can say for why I put Kittle number 1, which I think both of these are correct answers. But I put Kittle 1 because I see him as more of a voluntary blocker and a happy to do my job blocker and an enthusiastic blocker more than Kelsey or most tight ends in general. You know, he really seems to enjoy all aspects of what he does.
Oh, definitely.
And so that's why I had him number 1 instead of number 2.
I think Brandon was right to say with and it's the same reason why I had Tyreek up a little bit higher. And yeah, it might be a little bit of your quarterback, but Kelsey's been there since Alex Smith. So yeah, Kelsey's just makes those big time plays. Now Kittle can as well. I think the speed and flashiness of Kittle is what kind of gives Kelsey the advantage, I think, a little bit. Because I just don't know.
Really?
Because I think Kelsey is a more physical runner and a more physical tight end. And I think that's the difference. And that's how you can get separation. But who knows with Kelsey? I've seen him run the ball a few times. Both are incredibly athletic.
Yeah, can't go wrong either way.
Yeah.
Definitely top 2, though.
Either or is 1 or 2. You can have that debate, but you're overruled 2-1. I
All
guess
right.
I was overruled too because Julio was your guys.
We're flipping to the other side of the ball. What do we want to start with here?
I have. You want me to do my extra group because I have 4 groups on defense and you have. You
Okay.
guys both
I
have,
have
3.
Okay,
But
so
my D line and my linebackers are kind of interchangeable.
why don't we? Yeah, Brandon, why don't you give us your edge rushers first, and then we'll bring those up probably in a few people that we have for linebackers.
Okay, so I'm doing my edge rushers. I split up my defense into interior defensive linemen, edge rushers, linebackers, and DBs. So for edge rushers, my number 5 guy is Cam Jordan in New Orleans.
I had a monster season.
I mean, he's a stud.
Yeah,
For number 4,
he's been doing it for a decade.
yeah. For number 4, I got Von Miller, who he's over 30, but he's still getting it done. The guy is one of the best pass rushers there's ever been. Number 3, I have Daniil Hunter in Minnesota. I think this guy is unblockable.
He looks like a science experiment.
Yeah.
Of a defensive lineman.
The
Where
guy is scary.
He looks almost too lanky and thin, and then he just uses his arms and he's crazy.
Yeah. I got TJ Watt, who's my dark horse for Defensive Player of the Year this year, at number 2 for my edge rushers. And then Khalil Mack. I mean, come on. It's Khalil Mack. He's my best pass rusher in the league this year from the edge.
So
From the edge.
your edge rushers, I had 4 of those 5 guys on either my lineman or linebackers list. How about you, Jake? Did you have most of those as well?
Yeah, I had 3 of them.
Okay, so let's do some down linemen. And my number 5 is the combination of Joey Bosa and
Bosa fan.
yeah, and Ingram. Hey, they're really good together, and I just couldn't pick because they complement each other so well. For the Chargers, is one as good without the other? So we're just gonna.
Yeah, I was
them both at
trying
5.
to come up with. I was thinking of Joey and Nick, but I went with Cam Jordan because he's couple time All Pro.
Yeah.
That was the difference there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's done it and can do it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what the list is about.
I think for my defensive lineman, number 5, for me is Nick Bosa, because I think he had one of the best rookie seasons I've seen at that position. I mean, he was at times just unstoppable, and I thought he was a big factor in what got the Niners to the Super Bowl. So I have Nick Bosa at number 5.
I'm going to jump off of that real quick. I had DeForest Buckner at 4. And that was the 49er that I picked that was valuable to them. But how about for you, Brandon?
For my number 5 defensive lineman for interior, I put Cam Hayward from Pittsburgh. Again,
Barely missed my list.
again, he's not a top 5 if we're adding our, because you guys have a different list than I do, but he's my top 5 of guys who are playing in between the guard and the center.
3 down linemen.
Yep. I have Cam Hayward at number 5.
You're going to have more people on your list than we're going to have,
Definitely.
unfortunately.
I made an extra 5 guys.
I don't
so.
realize that I did something in my linebackers that I did not intend to do. And you can call me different, but anyway, you're
We're not
probably
even
disagree.
there. We're not even there.
No, I know, but I was looking ahead. I was like,
How about for your number 4 down lineman?
JD, I can't even say his name. Clowney, because I can never pronounce his name. He's a guy that, again, could be either or,
Jobless right now
which is crazy to me.
as we speak.
Because the last 2 years, I mean, he kind of tapered off at the end of the season.
I think he had a good year in Seattle.
But, yeah, I think he's still performing at a high level.
Especially at the end of the year. Not as great at the beginning, but by the end of the year, he found his groove.
And he's a guy that can play. And that's the interesting thing about the league now, because some of these edge rushers are listed at both. Some of them are defensive end, left, like outside linebackers. So, yeah, Clowney is my number 4.
You want to hear a fun story about Clowney? I'll always love this guy. He was the first live news story I ever broke on actual radio. It was when we were doing Saturday morning pregame and that trade went live.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I got to report it on KXNO, which was pretty baller. For your 4, Brandon, of interior
For number
linemen?
4, I put, for my list, I went with guys who are, I favored pass rush. I favored pass rush over a guy like Kenny Clark, who's not a pass rusher necessarily. So I went Zadarius Smith as a guy who plays, I mean, he plays all over the place, but the guy, he stands over the center and he just runs you over and gets the quarterback, you know.
You didn't put him in the edge group, or is
No.
this your way of getting him in here?
This is
without
more my
putting him
way of getting
edge?
in the, because
Yeah.
he's not a top 5. He's not a top 5 pass rusher in the league.
Right.
But he plays on the inside enough for me to where, and again, I favored pass rush over a guy who can, a Warren Sapp type defensive tackle.
He had very gaudy stats. He had a lot of
Oh, yeah.
hits this year. He
was-
played with a vigor.
I was going through all pro teams today, and I was surprised that he wasn't on it. That's how great of a season I thought he had.
Right. But it is kind of the name thing. Who's done it for a few years. And we'll get to our linebackers. But now for number 3 defensive lineman, down lineman, Brandon, who'd you have?
A guy we already mentioned, DeForest Buckner in Indianapolis.
Indianapolis, San Francisco.
He was just traded.
Behind. Brandon's like all over me here.
My number 3 is Cameron Jordan
Yeah.
from the Saints.
That's my 3 as well.
Yeah, pretty consistent, pretty good, all-pro guy, makes big-time plays, and yeah, that's surprising that more people had him on there, because he kind of blew on the scene for me in 2018 versus 2019.
I loved watching these reruns of.
He's also an XFL guy.
I've loved watching these reruns of. I've been watching the reruns of the Packers games the last couple of nights they've been on, and you had the 2011 Packers versus Saints game where Cam Hayward was a rookie, and Darren's, it was fun to watch, and then I watched the
Darren
Steelers,
Sproles.
the
Oh,
Steelers
a
game,
name.
the Super Bowl, the Steelers game where AB and Emmanuel Sanders are rookies.
I was watching that. Yeah, and they're
Yeah.
talking about the development of
Like
AB
talking
as
about,
a
man,
rookie.
AB's this guy we've never heard. Coming out of the 6th round, and man, he's been playing really well.
Eastern
and now
Michigan.
look where he is
Yeah.
and what he did. Yeah. And Emmanuel, you think about some of those. Emmanuel Sanders and AB are on the same team with Hines Ward. Like
Yeah,
that's a hell of a receiving core.
That was an incredible core. Yeah, absolutely was. I said I had Cam Jordan for my number 3 as well. For number 2, we've already said Danielle Hunter is my number 2 defensive lineman for what I expect from him in 2020, because he needs to get the numbers to match the potential, is kind of what we just said about Hunter Henry as well with the tight end group. But he has all of the physical tools as well as other people on their defense that should allow him to excel. And he's my number 2, as I want a lot from him. How about for you, Brandon, your number 2?
He's been hurt the last couple of years, but you can't argue with this guy. I mean, he's J.J. Watt. He's a stud. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year.
That's my number
Still
2
a
as well.
beast.
Is J.J. Watt.
He's not even on my list. Out of sight, out of mind.
Jeez.
Multiple years. He can't finish the season.
How many defensive linemen do you know that are hosting SNL?
He's a pop.
How many
He's a
defensive
pop culture
line-
superstar. It doesn't
Because
translate.
he's good. To get any... Oh, whatever. I agree with Brandon. J.J. Watt's number 2. Has he fallen off a little bit? Has he missed a step a little bit because of injuries? Sure. But he's still one of the best in the league.
I can't argue against that. I didn't even cross my mind while making this list, and I can't be more honest. But to be pretty honest, we probably all have the same number 1 here, the most impactful defensive lineman of the past 5-6 years now.
Yeah.
Ndamukong Suh. No.
No, yeah, definitely Aaron Donald. I made it because I originally made a top 10 defensive players regardless of position, and I have my numbers of my rankings from before, and there's a number 1 by Aaron Donald. He was my number 1 defensive player of any position. He's the best.
Yeah, he is.
He's actually unblockable.
You got he is a cheat code in
Yes.
real life, not in Madden as much as in real life. He is a cheat code. I was listening to, Pardon My Take when they had him on at Super Bowl week, and they asked him what he bench presses, and he says more than enough, and that was it. And I was like, I believe you.
Whatever you need me to.
Yeah, whatever you need me to, and then I'll get up without sweating and be like, cool, man. Because he can do that. The pictures that he's had, like the past few months on his Instagram, he doesn't look like a human. His workout photos, it's incredible looking. It looks like just a WWE guy all steroided up and super almost not real muscle looking,
boy.
like Bobby Lashley.
That boy.
He is. On to our linebackers though. And now I'm interested to see how many of the same names we have here.
This is what's gonna get interesting because I didn't intend to do this, but
That's okay. I'll go with my number 5. This is the one. I gotta stick with this tie as well. I gotta do it because they both deserve to be on this list, and I can't keep one of them off. Joe Schobert from Cleveland and KJ Wright from Seattle.
will you stop cheating and just make a decision?
KJ Wright. I guess that was pretty easy. But those two guys, Wright didn't have as good of a season as Schobert, but he was just a middle linebacker, that the old school guy, the rock, the anchor, the concrete in the middle that can get 3 interceptions and 2 forced fumbles in, the first half of the season when you're struggling. So I wanted to put him on there, but KJ Wright has just been consistent since, Legion of Boom time. Their linebacking core is still so solid in Seattle. KJ Wright, number 5.
For me, number 5, Sack Barrett. I was someone who I knew a little bit of when he played for the Broncos, but just the fact that he made such a huge impact on the Buccaneers defense, having 19 and a half sacks in his first year, doing so much that he got tagged out of that, which, again, was the right choice. Good job getting rid of Jameis. But, yeah, I just think his single performance there was unbelievable. And he not only was he getting sacks, but he was getting strip sacks, picks. He was all over the field. He was playing as a crazy pass rusher. So Sack Barrett is my number 5.
So you snuck in $2, both at number 5 on your list.
Yeah, well, you're not probably going to agree with my number 4.
Oh, Lordy. All right.
My number 5, and again, these are we're talking about it. I already
You
named
don't
my
have-
pass rushers,
you
so
do
Khalil
not have
Mack is
edge
not on my
rushers.
list. But I put Demario Davis at number 5 out of New Orleans. Great linebacker, sideline to sideline. Those are my middle linebacker types. That's who I got here, but I got Demario Davis at number 5.
How about for your 4?
Number 4, I put Darius Leonard from Indianapolis. I think he's led the league in tackles every year since he's been in the league.
That's not a good stat to have, though, because usually, in the early 2000s, it was always the Iowa State middle linebacker that led the Big 12 in tackles, and it was because we were always on defense.
Well, they have not been very good.
Exactly.
But he's a great middle linebacker. So he's my number 4.
Number 4. My number 4, Von Miller. He's not the where is that guy before every play check like Khalil Mack is, like he used to be. When they were on their Super Bowl run, you need to know where 58 is.
Super Bowl MVP.
Before the snap of every play. Well, that's because they had two quarterbacks that both could not be Super Bowl MVP.
Well, he had 3 sacks and a touchdown. So
he
did it.
he had a great game.
He earned it.
He had a great game.
Yeah.
But he's not.
Carried them the whole season.
But I don't feel going into 2020 he has that. I have 2.8 seconds to get this ball off before 58 gets from where he is to me. He doesn't write. I just didn't
agree.
feel that.
And that's why he was number 4 on my list.
Right. So he's 4 on
Similar
your
spot.
edge rusher
Yes.
list. He's 4 on my linebacker list.
Yes.
So technically, I have him
Very
ranked a
similar.
little higher than you.
Yeah.
Because you have 10 linebackers. But yeah, similar thoughts. And for you, Jake?
Yeah, I didn't do this on purpose, but I have Levante David as my number 4. I think yes, there are some serious problems with the Bucs secondary, but their linebackers are pretty decent. I think Levante has been extremely consistent for this Buccaneers team. He's been there his whole career. I had to pull up stats to justify my my.
No, I swear, he's
no,
good.
he had 82 tackles last year, 10 of them for loss. I'm trying to look up his sacks here. Only had more than 1 sack. Come on. But anyway, point is,
Don't say that out loud.
he didn't have Barrett's numbers because I think Barrett was a surprise and kind of took most offenses by surprise. But Levante is still consistently a good linebacker, and I think he had a good year last year, and I think he'll keep having a good year this year. I realize by making this, I maybe have just left him out and put in Barrett. But as it is, I still like Levante, and if there's ever an excuse to put a Husker guy in there, I'll do it. So.
Wow. Okay. How about for your 3, Jake?
Also, 2 Nebraska guys, because technically Barrett is from
All right.
Boys Town. Just saying.
Okay.
Just saying. My number 3.
Did you land him, though? The Huskers?
No, they did not.
Huh.
But he's from the state.
Yeah.
So I'll count.
Same with Danny Woodhead. Let that slip through your fingers,
Chapman
right?
State, Danny Woodhead.
Hate to see it.
You hate to see it.
Tom
Hey,
Osborne's
Sexy
walk-on.
Rexy Burkhead got a ring.
I'm telling you, Tom Osborne would have not let Danny Woodhead out of the state. That's all I'm saying.
I don't even know. Was it Bo
That's the T.
Pelini? That's who the coach was at the time. My number 3 is Von Miller. I thought about putting him at number 4. But I understand the same reasons that you guys are saying that he's not the same Von Miller that he was a few years ago.
But a B plus Von
But
Miller
he's
is
still-
a starting linebacker on
he's-
any team.
Exactly. He's still Von Miller.
Yeah.
Like he's still
Chicken farming
Yeah.
Von Miller.
one of the best commercials I've ever seen for Madden. I think it was maybe 17. Was they took "Sorry" from Justin Bieber, but they had
Oh,
Von
I've
Miller.
seen that. Yes.
And he's talking about Ultimate Team. And he's like, change up your rosters and start me.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw it.
Start me, and he just on your Madden team, and he's like dancing and stuff. It was one of the better commercials I've seen for Madden. So Von Miller is always him and his weird glasses that he always wears, those big frames,
I think it works in his favor.
his cowboy hat.
He's never uncomfortable.
He's a goofy dude.
He's always very comfortable. He's like, yeah, dude, I am from like the middle of nowhere, Texas
Texas
and
A&M.
I'm just gonna be a chicken farmer when I'm retired. I might like own a restaurant in town,
Such a cool, dorky guy that could probably rip your head off.
and very stylish, very stylish.
Overalls and cowboy. He is gonna be a chicken farmer too. It's gonna be great.
For my 3, I have Jalen Smith. Speaking of Texas.
Good answer. Good
Dallas.
answer.
I just, I have just these past 2 or 3 years, I have had this infatuation of the potential of the Cowboys linebacking core with
Sean Lee.
Sean Lee, Leighton Vander Esch, and Jalen Smith is probably the scariest 3 names if they're all at full potential of any linebacker room in the country, in my opinion. And so
Vander Esch is my favorite name though.
Vander
What a
Esch,
name.
the wolf hunter, the guy that hunts wolves in Idaho for fun.
And his last name's Vander Esch.
Yeah, and so if they could ever get these 3 guys together for more than 2 consecutive games at a time,
Stop getting hurt.
but the consistent one here is Jalen Smith. He is the guy that has been able to stick with it during the injuries of the other 2, very consistent, and his stats prove it that the Cowboys were right to bet on him. So he's my 3.
I was thinking of Jalen Smith I almost put him at number 4. But I put the other Dallas linebacker, Van Der Esch. I love Van Der Esch at number 3. He's definitely, I think he's the best one of those 3 linebackers.
Love him. Wolf Hunter.
I mean, yeah, to piggyback off of you, I had Leighton Van Der Esch at number 3 for my inside linebackers.
And, just like what we did with, picking a defensive lineman from the same team or, pick your poison that we've had before, that's not a wrong answer. I have nothing against picking Van Der Esch instead of Jalen Smith because they both have
I almost went
incredible
Van Der Esch, Jalen Smith 3 and 4. I almost did.
Ooh, hot stuff. Hot
Hot
stuff.
stuff.
Hot stuff.
Hachi Machi. My number 3, or my number. I already gave you my number 3. I'm working ahead.
We've all done 3s. How about for 2s?
I have T.J. Watt at my number 2.
Okay.
I think he's another guy that could be an edge rusher or a linebacker or whatever you want to say. But I mean, I want to see a 30 for 30 or something like just to talk about, or no, just maybe that could be a topic we could do. But the Watt family versus the Bosa family and just the level of talent that these two families have.
I like it.
It is crazy.
Versus the Gronks.
Yeah. And it's yeah, the Gronks. Yeah, the Gronk. But T.J. Watt has consistently been good since he's gotten in the league, and he is a difference maker, not just pass rushing, but he's actually very good at coverage for what he is as an outside linebacker. So he is my number 2.
My number 2, actually, I want to hear Brandon's first.
Okay. Number 2, I put Eric Kendricks from Minnesota. I think he is probably outside of my number 1, obviously. I think he's the best. He's a great pass coverage linebacker. He's not going to get any sacks. He's a Luke Kuechly type guy who's going to lead that defense.
Who none of us could put on our list because he just retired.
Yeah, exactly.
Who would have been
Who
on
would been
the
He'd
list.
been number 1 on my list if he was still here, Luke Kuechly. But
Overrated.
that Eric Kendricks
He plays for
is
the Panthers.
pretty close, I think.
He is a Swiss Army knife
Yeah.
of a linebacker. Yeah, I didn't have him on here though. My number 2, Bobby Wagner, Seattle.
I wish I would have had. If I could have rethought this list, I would have dropped
So-
Devontae and put him in there.
So yes, I have 2 Seahawk linebackers,
$2.
but they have been consistent for the past about a decade. These 2 guys have been there while the Legion of Boom has failed them, and they haven't been able to make it back to another Super Bowl. I just think that Bobby Wagner is a guy that you game plan around, not through, because he is not afraid of any play, and his pursuit and his power of hitting your ball handler is scary, from a middle linebacker. So I liked Wagner second. And now we got our 1s, which I think Jake and our number 1 has already been said.
And I already said him at number 1. I know who your number 1s are going to be.
It's obviously Khalil Mack.
Khalil Mack,
No,
which you had on your edge rusher.
he was my number
Brandon,
1 as well.
And we have his number 1 linebacker. So who's your number 1 non-edge rushing linebacker?
We already talked about him, Bobby Wagner.
Bobby Wagner. Love it.
I mean, he's best middle linebacker in the game.
I was hoping that you would have him 1 because I had him behind Mack. Yes.
What is the worst trade? What's the worst trade here? Is it the trade for DeAndre Hopkins or the trade for Khalil Mack?
Well, there is the argument that
Because either trade to me is bad.
the Raiders got
The Raiders is better.
got value for money.
The Raiders is better because of the picks they got. The Texans only got a 5th-round pick in David Johnson.
Yeah, and they're selling it as equal. It's like,
And
bro,
not 2 first rounds and a 3rd rounder.
cut it.
Cut it out.
Just cut that. Oh, man. So that's linebackers and edge rushers. And next we have our defensive backs.
So this is corners and safeties.
Yes. Oh, good. Yes.
I want to make sure we agreed on
corners
that.
and safeties. Yes, yes. So my number 5, and these are mostly all going to be do-it-all guys, except for maybe the top 1 or 2, which are island guys, as I like to call them, for cornerbacks. But my number 5, Desmond Trufant in Atlanta. He's battled for the top interception number the past few seasons, and I think that he's a very good lockdown defensive back. He's my number 5.
I had Richard Sherman. I think even though he was turned into burnt toast in the Super Bowl,
We knew there was going to be a play. Everyone turned on that game knowing there will be one play where Richard Sherman gets beat.
if I'm being honest, you're playing against the Chiefs. You're going to get beat.
Yeah.
But I think and we've talked about it before on this, where you have railed against Josh Norman. I agree with that because Richard Sherman did what Josh Norman couldn't do, and he went from a great situation that he had in Seattle, went to a rival team in the West, and is still performing at a high level and still one of the better corners in the league. So Richard Sherman is my number 5.
Made his own contract and then hit all the incentives.
People
how
don't
about that?
understand that Richard Sherman went to Stanford.
No, yeah,
he's a smart dude.
Yeah, he went from Compton to Stanford.
Yeah.
So, he can get through whatever situation he's in, is what those two things mean. He's an incredibly intelligent guy, and sometimes his on-field aggressiveness overshadows that he's incredibly articulate and very cerebral. So, spoiler alert, he's not on my list.
He's not on mine as well.
That's from
Wow.
a physicality standpoint, but I understand what you're saying and why you're saying it, and I can't fault you for
Trufant's
it.
not on my list, if I'm being honest.
That's okay.
I have
That's
more
okay.
safeties than anything, I think.
That's okay. My next two are both safeties, but Brandon, what do you have for 5?
My number 5 guy is Jalen Ramsey. Great cover corner.
I'm already looking at my list like, Paul, what'd you do here?
That's how I felt
Jalen
about
Ramsey.
linebackers.
Jalen Ramsey would be number 1 2 years ago,
Yeah.
but if that everything that happened in Jacksonville over the last year, and he might be the best. He might still be the best.
I'm taking off Desmond Trufant for Jalen Ramsey.
So I got Jalen Ramsey at number
You made your
5.
decision.
I messed up. He didn't make it into my 5. I messed up. I can't even explain this. My number 4, Kevin Bird. Just because I liked his storyline of his back and forth with Shannon Sharp, where he's putting up great numbers and Shannon's like, I don't even know who this kid is, and he said his name wrong, and then he said Bird said back to him, just chirped back at him after a good game, and it stuck with me. Of I like the guys. Well, Sherman does that too, but I like the guys that I know what I can do, and you will know too.
If I'm being honest, pretty much everybody on my defensive back list talks trash. And
That's what the best ones do.
well,
You can't have Earl Thomas on there.
You have to be a trash. You have to be in that position because you're dealing with divas. You're dealing with guys that you can't touch them and can't be around them, and you gotta, show them up. So you gotta be a good trash talker.
So who's your 4?
My number 4 is Jalen Ramsey. Similar.
I already lost this list, man.
Same situation. I think Jalen was the best in the game a few years ago. I think he's missed a step a little bit, but I still think he's one of the best in the league. So, yeah, number 4 is Jalen Ramsey.
How about for you, Brandon? Your 4?
For number 4, I put Tre'Davious White in Buffalo. He was a stud, first team All-Pro.
I thought you were higher on him. I got to say
No.
here.
I went with safeties. I went with safeties higher than my corners because my two guys higher on him than our reigning defensive player of the year are do it all. I mean, and absolute studs. So I went with Tre'Davious White.
Good corner. How about for your 3 then?
My number 3 is Minka Fitzpatrick in Pittsburgh. I mean, he comes in
our lists are so different.
comes in 2 years after 2 games and has 7 interceptions in Pittsburgh and brings them from the worst team, one of the worst teams in the league, to a possible playoff team.
One of his first games there, he almost basically single-handedly won the game for him.
Yeah.
With pick.
I mean, what the guy did this year is incredible, and he's going to get better.
You're bringing up great names here.
Dude, I'm actually surprised at how different our lists
Yeah,
are.
our lists are going to be different here, but I have a prediction. Might have just moved some stuff around, and they're not too different. But how about for you, Jake? Who's your 3?
Marcus Peters. I think Marcus Peters has been one of the better, defensive backs in the league. I think he's been pretty consistent.
Moved around and still held his own.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that he really helped shape the LA Rams defense, especially that secondary. And he's still doing one of the better in the league. So Marcus Peters is my number 3.
My number 3 is Tyrann Mathieu, Honey
He's my number
Badger.
2.
And that's because this is my top safety. Above this, I have 2 corners. But I have him as number 3 in my top safety because everything he does, he will load the box, he will rush, he will play protection, safety over the top. He does everything that could be asked at any point of a safety, and he does it with glee and enthusiasm, and he's a leader. So I have the Honey Badger as my 3. Brandon, how about for your 2?
For my number 2, and he's probably my favorite player to watch, and I assume that you probably don't watch a lot, and probably nobody really does. He plays for the New York Jets. His name's Jamal Adams.
I love Jamal.
This guy,
oh, man.
this guy,
Brandon
is-
just blew up my list.
incredible.
He's my number 1.
This guy is incredible. What he does, and I've only seen a couple Jets games, but that guy is everywhere, and it's fun to watch.
You want to hear a stat that's going to blow your mind?
Blow it.
He's a safety.
Mm-hmm.
6.5 sacks as a safety.
Yeah.
The guy is everywhere.
So you guys pretty much said the rest of my list. Honey Badger was number 2 for me, and number 1 was Jamal Adams. 6.5 sacks as a safety is insane. They almost had identical numbers. I was looking them up with tackles, and which, your safety should have low numbers because, that's not good.
If your front 7 are doing their job.
Honey Badger and Jamal Adams are almost identical for tackles and plays like that. But 6.5 sacks from Jamal Adams, to me, is no question. He is the best defensive back in the league for me.
I went a little different way than you guys, whereas you value the top safeties in the game as the top defensive backs. I put more of a premium for this list. I put more of a premium on the corners that can lock down one-on-one, where you don't have to worry about it. And so my number 2 was Trey White, and my number 1 was Stephon Gilmore.
Yes.
Because-
My number 1 is Stephon Gilmore as well. I don't think there's anybody better.
Right. Because those are the guys where the 2, there's a lot of other guys on this list that can do that, like Peters and Ramsey. But I think last season and what I expect from them this season, those are the 2 guys that I don't have to worry about you. I can actually move you and use you as the aggressor to the offense because they will avoid you, I think these 2 corners. And that's why I had them at 2 and 1.
Well, I mean, when you win Defensive Player of the Year as a DB,
Yeah.
you did something pretty
Is that the
special.
first since Charles Woodson?
I can't remember. It's always a pass rusher.
It
so
has either been Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt, or a pass rusher.
Khalil Mack won
Yeah.
it once. Yeah, I mean,
Vaughn's probably got a few.
Yeah.
But Charles Woodson won when with the Packers, so he might have been the last DB who also, played a lot of safety for us. Did you guys bring any kickers?
No.
I did not bring any kickers.
I got 3 kickers. Just honorable mention, Harrison Butker, Will Lutz, and Justin Tucker, I think, are the top 3 kickers in the game right now.
Roberto Aguayo?
Okay, let's calm down there. You got your Bucks on the list.
Hey, Mike Gay is not a bad kicker.
All
it's
right.
his name. It's 2020.
Well, thank you, Jake.